Most relationships do not fall apart because people never speak. They fall apart because people speak without being honest. They talk around the issue. They soften the truth until it disappears. They say, "I'm fine," when they are hurt. They say, "Nothing is wrong," when something is clearly wrong. They explain, defend, accuse, withdraw, or change the subject. And slowly, the relationship becomes filled with words, but empty of truth. This is one of the great struggles of human connection. People want to be understood, but they are often afraid to reveal what they truly feel. They want closeness, but they protect themselves with silence. They want honesty, but they fear what honesty might cost. So the question is not simply, why don't people communicate? Many people do communicate. The deeper question is, why do people struggle to communicate honestly? In the previous episode, we looked at the hidden patterns we bring into every relationship. We explored fear of abandonment, emotional withdrawal, people-pleasing, defensiveness, and silent expectations. Now we come to the place where those patterns often show themselves most clearly: conversation. Because communication is not only about words, it is about emotional safety. It is about trust. It is about whether a person believes they can tell the truth without being punished, rejected, mocked, misunderstood, or abandoned. This is why honest communication can feel so difficult. It does not only require language, it requires courage. One reason people struggle to communicate honestly is that honesty can feel dangerous. For some people, telling the truth has not always been safe. Maybe when they expressed hurt, they were called too sensitive. Maybe when they shared a need, they were ignored. Maybe when they disagreed, they were punished. Maybe when they cried, they were shamed. Maybe when they tried to explain themselves, no one listened. So later in life, they learn to protect themselves. They hold back. They minimize their feelings. They avoid difficult conversations. They say what will keep the peace instead of what is actually true. And from the outside, this may look like dishonesty, but often it is fear. The person may not be trying to deceive. They may be trying to survive emotionally. They may have learned that truth creates conflict, and conflict leads to pain. So they choose silence. But silence has a cost. What is not spoken does not disappear. It collects. It becomes distance. It becomes resentment. It becomes confusion. It becomes emotional loneliness. A person may think they are protecting the relationship by avoiding hard truths, but sometimes avoidance does not protect the relationship. It slowly weakens it, because intimacy cannot grow where honesty is always withheld. Another reason people struggle to communicate honestly is that they do not always understand their own feelings clearly. This is important. People often assume that communication is simple. Just say what you feel. But what if a person does not know what they feel? What if anger is covering sadness? What if criticism is covering loneliness? What if silence is covering fear? What if control is covering insecurity? What if irritation is covering disappointment? Human emotions are not always clean and obvious. Sometimes the first feeling we show is not the deepest feeling we carry. A person may say, "You never help me," but underneath, they may feel, "I feel alone." A person may say, "You are always busy," but underneath they may feel, "I miss feeling important to you." A person may say, "Do whatever you want," but underneath they may feel, "I am hurt, but I do not know how to say it without sounding needy." This is why many conversations go wrong. People communicate from the surface emotion, not the deeper truth. They speak from frustration instead of vulnerability. They speak from accusation instead of need. They speak from fear instead of honesty. And when that happens, the other person reacts to the surface. They defend themselves against the criticism, but never hear the pain underneath. Then both people feel misunderstood. One person feels unheard, the other feels attacked, and the real issue remains hidden. Honest Communication requires self-awareness. It asks us to pause and ask, what am I really feeling? What am I afraid to say? What do I need the other person to understand? Am I trying to communicate, or am I trying to protect myself from being vulnerable? These questions are not easy, but without them, people often speak from the wound, not from the truth. Another reason people struggle with honesty is that they confuse honesty with harshness. Some people think honest communication means saying everything exactly as it comes to mind. They say, "I'm just being honest," while using honesty as a weapon. They unload pain without care. They speak truth without tenderness. They criticize without responsibility. They express anger without considering the impact of their words. But honesty without compassion can become cruelty. And on the other side, some people avoid honesty because they think any difficult truth is unkind. They do not want to hurt anyone, so they hide what they feel. They pretend everything is fine. They agree when they disagree. They swallow resentment in the name of peace. But kindness without honesty can become self-betrayal. This is the balance many relationships struggle to find. Truth without care can wound. Care without truth can deceive. Healthy communication needs both. It needs the courage to speak clearly and the maturity to speak responsibly. It is possible to say, "That hurt me," without attacking. It is possible to say, "I need more from this relationship," without blaming. It is possible to say, "I disagree," without disrespect. It is possible to say, "I need space," without disappearing emotionally. It is possible to be honest without becoming cruel, and it is possible to be kind without becoming silent. This is one of the skills many people were never taught. They were taught to win arguments. They were taught to avoid conflict. They were taught to keep peace. They were taught to be strong. They were taught to be agreeable, but they were not always taught how to speak the truth with emotional responsibility. Another reason honest communication is difficult is that people fear the other person's reaction. This fear can be powerful. A person may know exactly what they want to say, but still remain silent because they imagine the response. What if they get angry? What if they shut down? What if they leave? What if they blame me? What if they use my honesty against me later? What if they think less of me? So the truth stays inside, not because it is unimportant, but because the person does not feel safe enough to release it. And this is where relationships face a serious test, because honest communication does not depend only on the speaker. It also depends on the listener. A relationship cannot become honest if one person is punished every time they tell the truth. If every concern becomes an argument, honesty will shrink. If every emotion is mocked, vulnerability will disappear. If every disagreement leads to distance, people will stop being direct. If every painful truth is met with defensiveness, the relationship will become shallow. This is why listening is not passive. Listening is an act of emotional discipline. It requires the listener to stay present when they feel uncomfortable. It requires them to hear pain without immediately making themselves the victim. It requires them to resist the urge to interrupt, correct, or defend too quickly. It requires them to ask, "What are you trying to help me understand?" That one question can change the direction of a conversation, because most people do not only want to speak, they want to feel received. They want to know their words have somewhere safe to land. Another reason people struggle to communicate honestly is that they are afraid of conflict. Many people believe conflict is a sign that something is wrong, but conflict is not always the enemy of a relationship. Sometimes conflict is the place where truth finally appears. The real danger is not disagreement. The real danger is unresolved distance. The real danger is fake peace. The real danger is two people pretending everything is fine while emotionally moving farther apart. A healthy relationship does not avoid every difficult conversation. It learns how to survive them. It learns how to disagree without humiliation. It learns how to repair after pain. It learns how to say, "We are struggling right now, but we do not have to destroy each other to be honest." This matters because many people fear that if they say the truth, the relationship will become worse. But often, the truth is already affecting the relationship. It is just doing it silently. The silence is already creating distance. The resentment is already shaping tone. The unspoken disappointment is already changing behavior. The truth may not have been said, but it is still present. Honest communication does not create the problem. Often, it reveals the problem that silence has been hiding, and once something is revealed, it can finally be understood. Another communication struggle comes from the desire to be right. When people feel hurt, they often enter conversation like a courtroom. They gather evidence, they remember old examples, they prepare arguments, they replay what happened and build their case. Then the conversation begins. But the goal is no longer understanding. The goal is winning. Who is right? Who started it? Who caused more pain? Who remembers the facts correctly? Who deserves the apology? But relationships cannot breathe inside a courtroom, because when communication becomes a trial, both people become lawyers, and neither becomes a listener. This does not mean facts do not matter. They do. Accountability matters. Truth matters. But in relationships, being factually correct is not always the same as being emotionally wise. A person can win the argument and still lose closeness. They can prove their point and still leave the other person feeling unseen. They can explain themselves perfectly and still avoid responsibility. This is why honest communication asks for more than accuracy. It asks for humility. Humility says, "Maybe I do not see the whole picture. Maybe my intention was not the same as my impact. Maybe I can care about your pain without surrendering my own truth. Maybe this conversation is not about defeating you, but understanding us." That kind of humility is rare, but it is powerful. It turns conflict into a place of learning instead of a place of emotional combat. Another reason people struggle to communicate honestly is that honesty may require change. This is something many people avoid, because once the truth is spoken, the relationship may no longer be able to continue as it was. If someone says, "I feel ignored," then attention must be examined. If someone says, "I do not feel safe being honest," then the emotional climate must be examined. If someone says, "I am tired of pretending I am okay," then the pattern of silence must be examined. Truth invites responsibility, and responsibility invites change. That is why many people resist honest conversation. They may not only fear the truth, they may fear what the truth will require. It may require apology. It may require boundaries. It may require new habits. It may require admitting harm. It may require letting go of control. It may require facing the fact that love alone is not enough without effort, patience, and maturity. This is why honest communication is not just a relationship skill. It is a character issue. It reveals whether a person is willing to grow, because a relationship cannot become healthier if both people only want comfort, but not truth. Growth requires discomfort, not constant pain, not disrespect, not emotional chaos, but the discomfort of seeing what needs to change, and sometimes that is the moment where relationships either deepen or decline. They deepen when both people are willing to listen, adjust, and take responsibility. They decline when one or both people choose avoidance, blame, denial, or emotional escape. So what does honest communication look like? It does not always look dramatic. Often it is simple. It sounds like, "I need to tell you something, and I want to say it carefully. I felt hurt, but I do not want to attack you. I realize I have been quiet, but I have not been okay. I need some space, but I do not want to disappear. I reacted strongly because something old was triggered in me. I want to understand your side, but I also need you to understand mine. These are not perfect sentences, but they create a different emotional atmosphere. They show responsibility. They show care. They show that the goal is not to win, punish, or escape. The goal is to understand. And when two people can communicate with that intention, the relationship has a chance to grow, not because everything becomes easy, but because truth is no longer treated as the enemy. This is the heart of the matter. People struggle to communicate honestly because honesty asks them to risk something. It asks them to risk being seen. It asks them to risk being misunderstood. It asks them to risk hearing something uncomfortable. It asks them to risk changing. It asks them to risk letting go of the protective roles they have used for years. But without honesty, relationships become performances. People play the role of being fine. They play the role of being strong. They play the role of being easygoing. They play the role of being unaffected. But behind the role, something is often waiting to be said, and the longer it waits, the heavier it becomes. A relationship does not need every thought spoken without restraint. It does not need constant emotional intensity. It does not need endless conversations about every small feeling, but it does need enough honesty to remain alive, enough honesty to prevent resentment from becoming normal, enough honesty to allow repair, enough honesty to say, this matters, enough honesty to say, I am still here, but we need to talk. Because communication is not only the exchange of words, it is the bridge between inner experience and shared understanding. And if that bridge collapses, people may remain close in appearance, but far apart in reality. So as we close this episode, remember this. Honest communication is not about saying everything harshly, and it is not about hiding everything politely. It is the mature practice of telling the truth with enough courage to be clear and enough care to remain human. In the next episode, we will explore the psychology of emotional distance, why people pull away, go silent, become unavailable, or slowly disconnect even when they still care. If this video gave you something to think about, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And before you leave, ask yourself this: what truth have I been avoiding because I am afraid of what it might change?